collection of fascinating art and sculpture and antiquities from around the world. Where else could I be but the Louvre in Paris? If you love museums, like I do, the Louvre is certainly on your bucket list. It's a former palace, and today it's home to some of the world's great treasures. Now, it could take weeks or even months to explore this gigantic museum. It's spread across 3 huge wings and has a staggering 400 rooms. Not everyone has a lot of time to spend in the Louvre, though. Sometimes you only have a few hours. That's why I've compiled this list of the top 10 must-see treasures when you are visiting the Louvre. Of course, it is impossible to choose just 10 items that you should see in this wonderful museum. So let me know in the comments section below what I missed, and I guess I'll just have to make a part 2. Also, please remember to like and subscribe if you want more virtual tours of the world's greatest museums. Starting in at number 10, we have the Great Sphinx of Tanis, followed by Pacheri, the Louvre's mummy. We'll witness liberty leading the people before making our way to the Code of Hammurabi. At number 6, we have the Coronation of Napoleon, and then Michelangelo's Dying Slave and Rebellious Slave. We'll have a look at the Raft of the Medusa, and then go visit the Venus de Milo, the Winged Victory of Samothrace, and of course, finishing with the Mona Lisa. Let's start off with number 10, often called the Guardian of the Louvre Museum. The Great Sphinx of Tanis is one of the largest sphinxes located outside of Egypt. It was excavated in 1825 in the Temple of Amun in Tanis, the Egyptian capital during the 21st and 23rd dynasties. The Sphinx greets us at the entrance to the Department of Egyptian Antiquities. Check out his outstretched claws. While he may look calm and serene, he's ready for action. Egyptologists have trouble dating this object because different pharaohs scratched out their predecessors' names and replaced them with their own. This was a cheeky practice that was really common in ancient Egypt, and it means that Egyptologists can only really date it between the 4th and the 12th dynasty. Henry Salt, an English Egyptologist and collector, sold this sphinx and the mummy we'll talk about next to the Louvre after his Egyptian team excavated it. The curator of the Egyptian department at that time was Jean-François Champollion. I talk about Champollion in my top 10 objects at the British Museum video because he translated the Rosetta Stone, and therefore he's the reason we can understand these hieroglyphics. But was this Sphinx Salt's to sell? Let me know if you'd like a video about the controversies of the Louvre. Let's say our final goodbyes to the Great Sphinx as we stay in ancient Egypt for number 9 on our top 10 list to see the only human mummy at the Louvre. While the Louvre has a large collection of mummy coffins and sarcophagi that we're looking at now, it only has one mummified human. And look at how many people are gathered around him. He is one of the most famous displays in the Louvre's Department of Egyptian Antiquities. The museum's collection spans more than 4 millennia, from 4000 BCE to the 4th century CE. You can traverse its galleries and learn all about Egyptian life and death from the most ancient days of the Egyptian civilization through to the Middle Kingdom, New Kingdom, Ptolemaic, Roman, and Byzantine eras. Let's have a closer look at the mummy and his unusual and intricate head wrapping. His face and head is encased in woven strips of linen, and the result is a geometric, twisted square pattern. I have to say, as someone who really does enjoy watching spooky movies, this mummy genuinely is the only real Egyptian mummy I've ever seen that actually kind of scares me. Now, he likely lived between 305 BCE to about 30 BCE, we're not sure, and that was the Ptolemaic period of ancient Egypt, the same time period as the Rosetta Stone. Experts believe that his name was either Nenu or Pacheri. He was almost certainly an upper middle class person. Remember, mummification like this was only for the most elite people in society. To mummify his corpse, first, his most important organs were removed and then preserved in jars, called canopic jars. But his brain and heart were left intact in his body. He was desiccated with salt and then covered in pungent resin and lovely aromatic oils before being wrapped up with this linen. These oils are why the Victorians loved to attend mummy unwrapping parties. Well, one of the reasons. Believe it or not, mummies actually smell really good. Let me know if you would like a video just on this strange practice of mummy unwrapping parties. But wait, there are tons of mummy coffins in the Louvre, as I've been showing you, so where are the rest of the actual human remains? Well, when the Egyptian department first opened in 1827, they couldn't figure out how to keep the mummies from decaying. This one managed to survive, but the rest are actually buried in Parisian cemeteries. By the way, Europeans like Henry Salt were excavating Egypt like crazy at this time, and also negotiating with local government officials who may or may not have had permissions or the right to give these objects away. If you'd like to see a video on the ethics of mummies in museums, including displaying human remains, and the question of returning them to Egypt, let me know in the comments. Now for number 8, we're heading to see the first of 3 French paintings from the 19th century that I've included on our top 10 list. There are countless paintings I could have included. Caravaggio, my favorite, Titian, Vermeer, but the truth is that you can see many of those artists in other museums around Europe and around the world. But here at the Louvre, it's all about these 3 massive canvases that are extremely important to French culture. Liberty Leading the People by Eugène Delacroix, The Coronation of Napoleon by Jacques-Louis David, and The Raft of the Medusa by Théodore Géricault. Let's start with number 8 on our list, Liberty Leading the People by Eugène Delacroix. Delacroix is considered the greatest French Romantic painter, and you can visit his grave at the Père Lachaise Cemetery. I'm going to embed a link just above for a great tour of Père Lachaise by my colleague Margaret. Give it a watch. This painting depicts an allegory of the 1830 French Revolution, a symbolic interpretation of the events that toppled King Charles X. The bare-breasted woman in the center is Liberty, a symbol of French liberation, referred to in France as Marianne. She is a specific version of the goddess of liberty, and this goddess has been depicted countless ways over the millennia. Marianne personifies liberté, égalité, fraternité, and reason. In this painting, she is wearing a Phrygian cap, an Eastern European hat made popular during the 1797 French Revolution when it was called a liberty cap. She has kind of a sweaty hue to her skin. She has underarm hair, not to mention a musket in her left hand. In her right hand, she's holding the French flag, known as le tricolore, which the militia had worn when they stormed the Bastille and overthrew the king. Until that point, the French flag had always been a gold fleur-de-lis. Of course, you might also recognize Marianne from a massive statue that the French gifted to the United States in 1884. Though not strictly Marianne, the Statue of Liberty is often considered to be based on this concept. The people in this painting are all working side by side, even though they are of different classes. This personifies égalité, or egalitarianism. There is a man in a top hat, clearly a member of the French upper class. Near him is a factory worker in an apron, and you can also see a student with a black beret. They're all working together for the principles of the new French Republic. This painting was good for Delacroix's soul and for his own personal artistic integrity. To keep up with his lavish lifestyle, he had previously been working for King Charles X, and he hated working for a man he considered a, quote, enemy. I mean, I guess he didn't hate him enough to not take his money, but he felt much better about this subject matter, which was a lot more in line with his values. He soon wrote, "I have undertaken a modern subject, a barricade, and though I may not have fought for my country, at least I shall have painted for her. It has restored my good spirits." For number 7 on our top 10 list, we're heading to a completely different wing of the three wings of the Louvre, the Richelieu wing, to see a famous legal document that dates to 1754 BCE. It's the Code of Hammurabi, which is a remarkably well-preserved set of laws from ancient Mesopotamia, enacted by King Hammurabi, who was the 6th king of Babylon, who ruled from 1792 to 1750 BCE. That makes this documentation even older than the biblical laws of Christianity. The basalt stele is 2.5 meters tall, which is 7.5 feet, and it details 280 laws that cover some of the most common problems encountered in ancient Babylon, including nurses' duties, marriage, divorce, adoption, inheritance, and engagement. Have a look at the top of the stele, and you can see the god Shamash, the ancient Mesopotamian sun god. Shamash is reciting this divine legal code directly to King Hammurabi. That does remind me a bit of the Ten Commandments. The Code of Hammurabi was discovered in 1901 and was soon translated from its original Akkadian language, which uses cuneiform script. The first section is a poetic ode to Hammurabi, which calls him the protector of the weak and oppressed, while the remaining 4 sections detail the actual laws. The Code of Hammurabi is considered a hugely important document that has influenced modern law all over the world. It's depicted in the U.S. Capitol, and there is a replica of this exact stele at the headquarters of the United Nations in New York City. Of course, it's impossible to include every iconic and interesting object in the Louvre on this list, but I did want to let you know that just a few steps away from the Code of Hammurabi, you can find these monolithic lamassu from the exterior of the palace of Sargon II in Khorsabad. If you're a fan of Mesopotamian history, these are a must. Number 6 on our list is the second 19th century French painting that I've included. It's called The Coronation of Napoleon, and it depicts, you guessed it, the coronation of Napoleon, when he was crowned leader of the French Empire on December 2nd, 1804, which ended the First Republic of France. We already saw how this one ended with our previous painting, Liberty Leading the People. In this painting, we can see Pope Pius VII. He didn't like to travel, but he had come all the way from Rome to bless Napoleon's reign. Napoleon wanted to evoke the previous grandeur of Charlemagne's coronation, which had occurred around 1,000 years earlier. The painter was Jacques-Louis David, considered one of the most important French neoclassicist painters. But Napoleon didn't give David much artistic leeway. He was obsessed with all of the details, and he told David exactly who should be placed where. So much so that he actually created fiction. It is a highly idealized version of what Napoleon wanted to have happened. The biggest glaring difference is that his mother, Letizia Bonaparte, is depicted prominently in the painting, and she wasn't even there. She was protesting the friction between Napoleon and his brothers Lucien and Joseph, who also weren't there, and she wouldn't attend. She also reportedly did not approve of Josephine, who was 6 years older than Napoleon and couldn't bear him children, but that's a whole different video. During the ceremony, Napoleon reached out and grabbed the crown from the Pope and then placed it on his own head. This was actually really insulting to the Pope, and it made Napoleon seem petulant and impatient. After all, the Pope placing the crown on his head was meant to be symbolic approval from God. Napoleon soon realized that he hadn't behaved very well, so he instead has David portray him as placing the crown on the head of Empress Josephine. This is a much more chivalrous and gracious gesture, far more befitting of an emperor. The painting was a huge success with the public, and more importantly for David, Napoleon loved it. He said, "It is not a painting. There are people walking in this picture. Life is everywhere. David, I salute you. You have made me a French knight." David, understanding that he owed his success to the emperor's approval of his work, later said, "I shall slide into posterity in the shadow of my hero." Now, let's head downstairs to the Renaissance. Okay, now we're heading towards some of the truly amazing objects on our tour. Okay, they're all amazing, but I have to say that number 5, Michelangelo's Dying Slave and Rebellious Slave, is my personal favorite on this tour. When the doors open in the morning, everyone runs towards the Mona Lisa, but I recommend giving these remarkable statues your full attention. These sculptures were created by Michelangelo, the most iconic Renaissance artist, along with Da Vinci, of course, between 1513 and 1516. Along with 4 other statues, they were meant to flank the tomb of Pope Julius II, but they didn't make it onto the final version of the monument, which was completed in 1542. Instead, Michelangelo gave them as a thank you gift to a gracious host, and they were later sold to the Cardinal of Richelieu in 1632. In 1793, at the height of the Reign of Terror during the French Revolution, a widow of one of the Dukes of Richelieu attempted to sell them. The government seized her assets, and they landed in the Louvre in 1794. By the way, they were originally referred to in Italian as prigioni, which means prisoner, but people start calling them the slaves in the 19th century. They're more than 2 meters tall, 7.5 feet, so they really do tower over you. And they are every bit as fascinating and complex as Michelangelo's David, which is in Florence. They depict and evoke agony, ecstasy, life, death, pain, pleasure. Michelangelo had just finished the Sistine Chapel ceilings, and these sculptures truly cemented him as one of the greatest artists of all time. Who's your favorite artist of all time? Let me know in the comments. These really are my favorite objects in the Louvre. Don't miss them. Okay, while this isn't strictly one of our top 10 items, I must point out the Galerie d'Apollon. This is where the French crown jewels are housed, and it's absolutely stunning. For number 4 on the list, it's the Raft of the Medusa. Now, if you could only see one painting in the Louvre, I mean, let's face it, you're probably going to go see the Mona Lisa. But I would advise you to bypass the old masters and head to the Raft of the Medusa by Théodore Géricault. In this work, he shows us a horrifying view into the aftermath of a real-life shipwreck that rocked the world. It occurred on July 2nd, 1816, when the crew of the Medusa were shipwrecked off the coast of Mauritania in northwest Africa. At least 147 men had been aboard the ship, and they realized they faced certain death on the isolated beach in the hot sun. They worked together to construct a raft from the ship's hull, but this would be the last time they all worked together. So much for fraternité. That's because within 13 days, all but 15 of the men would die. The men on the raft were eventually discovered, and they were suffering from extreme dehydration. They had survived through cannibalism and likely murdered some of their shipmates to eat them. This painting depicts the moment when a French military ship passed by the raft. Faced with the wild-eyed men on board, they refused to save them. However, they were soon rescued, and the cannibalism, as well as the Medusa's captain's incompetence, became an international scandal. Géricault interviewed 2 survivors of the horror, and he even asked them to reenact their traumatic experience. In a common practice for painters at the time, he studied corpses to get the shades and colors of the dying, rotting flesh just right. It's really big. It's a huge painting. It's hard to get everything in one shot, but hopefully you'll see in the image that I put up all the little details. Géricault released this painting at the Paris Salon in 1819, and it caused a huge stir. Even though he was then an unknown 27-year-old painter, he would soon be considered a master of French Romanticism. He would go on to influence important artists, such as Delacroix, who we just saw, and Manet, one of my personal favorites, who I detail in my Musée d'Orsay video. It was extremely hot in the Louvre this day, and so there's me giving a thumbs up to the air conditioning vents, which are rare. Number 3 on our list is one of the world's most famous sculptures, even if you just know it from The Simpsons. the Venus de Milo. But a lot of what you know about her is likely wrong, including her name. The statue was unearthed on the Greek island of Melos in 1820, and it dates to around 100 BCE. She was discovered by a farmer in his field, and the public immediately began referring to her as Venus. But there's a giant problem with using the name Venus. That's a Roman goddess of sex and love. Roman, not Greek. And considering she is found in Greece, if she is a goddess of love and sex, she should be called Aphrodite de Milo, not Venus. But wait, she's probably not a love goddess at all. She is much more likely to be Amphitrite, the goddess of the sea and wife of the sea god Poseidon. For obvious reasons, this goddess was beloved in the seafaring Milos, and so we should probably start calling her Amphitrite de Milo, but I don't think that's going to catch on. So who created her? It could have been Praxiteles, one of the most talented sculptors in ancient Greece, but he was alive a few centuries too early. It's much more likely to be a piece by Alexandros of Antioch, who was alive at the right time and in the right place. There is speculation that she might have been sculpted originally holding an apple, and we know that she was originally festooned with elaborate metal jewelry. We also know that she was painted in bright colors, just like most ancient sculpture. I know, we tend to look at these statues and think, how understated and sophisticated with this neutral ecru white. But they were actually a riot of color. Funnily enough, Renaissance sculptors like Michelangelo didn't actually know this, and that's why his iconic pieces are uncolored marble. He's mimicking his version of the past, but it's not historically accurate. We're extremely lucky that 19th century conservators didn't try to replace her arms, as they did with many other damaged sculptures. We'll see one next. For me, the Venus de Milo's imperfection is what makes her so wonderful. Come on, I choose to think that about myself. As we're making our way to number 2, remember to like and subscribe to my channel if you want to see even more museum tours. Coming in at number 2, the Winged Victory of Samothrace. It's in the main staircase of the Louvre, where it has resided since 1866, and this is really the only place in the Louvre that does justice to its size and grandeur. The monumental sculpture is considered the finest example of Hellenistic art, and it's really easy to see why. I visited twice on my recent trip. Here's the first time at around noon. And here's the second time, right when the museum opened. You can really see a difference. It was a much more special experience when I had it to myself. So we are looking at Nike and the ancient Greek goddess of victory, and yes, like the shoes. They took the name from this goddess. The statue dates to around the 2nd century BCE, a similar time frame to our previous entry, the Venus de Milo. Charles Champoiseau found it in pieces while he was excavating on the Greek island of Samothrace in 1863. As the vice-consul in the Ottoman city of Adrianople, he regularly visited Samothrace looking for buried treasure and antiquities like this one. For Champoiseau and his contemporaries, owning antiquities was a status symbol. They certainly didn't give much thought to the ethics of digging up the land in a foreign country and carting away its treasures. Again, let me know if you'd like a video on the most controversial objects in the Louvre. The entire piece is more than 6 meters, that's 18 feet tall. Nike herself is 3 meters tall just on her own. She stands confidently atop the ship's bow, which is made of gray marble. In contrast, her body is white marble, though both of these would have been painted. Nike has huge wings, and we can see that the sculptor was extremely skilled. Just look at the way that the wind is blowing her robes against the form of her body, making her quite appealing and even a little bit sexual. Folded fabric is really difficult to sculpt in a natural way, but this looks effortless. When you come to see the Winged Victory of Samothrace, stand in a few different places and make sure that you have a look from different angles. Like our number 1 piece, the Mona Lisa, it really does change depending on the angle you view it from. Unlike the Venus de Milo, this statue has been partially restored. The right wing is a modern replica completed in the 19th century. Thankfully, no one replaced her head, feet, or her arms. By the way, if you want to see her original hand, head to the glass case to the left of the statue. It was only discovered in 1950, and you can see it's much bigger than my own hand. Now, let's head to number 1 on our top 10 list. We're going upstairs to room 711 in the Denon wing. You didn't think I was going to leave you hanging. Of course, the number 1 thing that you must see in the Louvre is the Mona Lisa. Of course, I barely got to see it. Have a look at these huge crowds. This was the first day that I went to the Louvre, and it was just like this on the second day as well. You're going to see in a moment that on my own in front of the Mona Lisa, I only had about 7 seconds in total. Blink and you'll miss it. To be fair, it was nice to get that 10 seconds or so of personal time with the Mona Lisa. The museum staff has recently implemented a queuing system, so you kind of wind your way through a velvet rope to get to the front, and then you get maybe 10, maximum 15 seconds before they shoo you away. However, in past years, it was more like a scrum, and you really had to fight your way to even get a few moments. Most people just ended up holding their cameras up high. Let's have a look at the painting itself. Sometimes an object becomes famous because of its history and the popular culture that arises around it, rather than just its artistic merit, and that is certainly the case here. The Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci was painted between 1503 and 1506. It's called La Gioconda in Italian, and we know that it depicts Lisa Gherardini, who was the wife of Francesco del Giocondo, a Florentine nobleman. Da Vinci was supposed to give this painting to his patron, but he instead brought it with him to France, leaving behind a flustered Giocondo. Clearly, he recognized that there was something special about the portrait. Had Da Vinci left it with his patrons in Florence, it probably would not be the subject of so many parodies and also this massive queue. Seriously, people actually run to try and get here first thing in the morning. Now, Mona Lisa is famous for 2 main reasons. The first, of course, is that enigmatic smile. From some angles, she looks like she's smirking. From others, she looks like she's smiling and sometimes even frowning. But the second reason is more interesting. She was stolen. The Mona Lisa shot to worldwide fame when the painting was stolen in 1911, and museum staff did not notice it was missing right away. It was taken by Vincenzo Peruggia, a petty criminal wearing a janitor's uniform. He mistakenly believed that the painting had been stolen from Italy by Napoleon, and he thought he was doing his patriotic duty. He stowed it away for 2 years and was caught when he tried to sell it to an art dealer in 1913. It was displayed in the Uffizi in Florence for a short time, with Italians weeping when they saw it in person on their own home soil. Peruggia only served a short time in prison. The Italian legal system went easy on him. So wait, how did the Louvre get the Mona Lisa? While many objects in the Louvre have dubious or downright illegal origins, this one is completely legal. French King François I purchased the Mona Lisa when Da Vinci died in 1519, and then he hung it in the gallery at Fontainebleau. There is a Napoleon connection after all, but not in the way Peruggia thought. Napoleon loved it so much that it hung in his bedroom in the Tuileries before eventually coming to the Louvre. So what do you think? Is it worth the wait? When you come to the Louvre, are you going to see the Mona Lisa? Let me know in the comments. One of the nicest things about the Louvre is no matter where you are in the building, the exit signs or sorties are extremely clearly marked. So for those families with tired kids who want to get out of here, or for tourists like me that need some lunch, it's really easy to find the exit. And that's also my cue to leave. It's time for me to go have some lunch, catch my Eurostar, but I'll see you the next time I'm in the museum. Bye!